Let us treat you to a vintage episode of my previous podcast, We Knew the Moon, featuring Randa as a co-host.
Top up your spooky meter until we come back soon with a new season.
Welcome to the Switchblade Sisters Social Club, a true crime podcast where two sisters exploit their worst fears for your entertainment. You're welcome. I'm Dee.
And I'm Randa, and together we are the Safieh sisters. For more information, check out our website at www.switchbladesistersocialclub.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at Switchblade Sisters Social Club.
Thanks for listening. Hi everyone, this is Dee from We Knew the Moon, and I am joined today by a very special guest because it is my sister. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Randa Safieh. I'm Deanna's sister, and this is the first time I've been on the podcast.
So Randa, you do editing and proofing and social media management and virtual assisting and all sorts, don't you?
Yep.
Where can people find out about you? Where's your website?
So my website is randasafieh.com, but you can also find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook.
Great. So I'll put the links in the show notes so people can check you out if they're interested. She's really very good, but I'm really very biased also, but she is actually genuinely very good. So I was super excited about doing this topic with you because it's a little bit of an obsession of ours. I think since we were little, I don't know why, I think lots of people are fascinated by this topic, right? Because today we're doing cults.
Yes. Let's go. It's been 30 years since I've been privy to your storytelling. And every time the result is that I'm terrified.
Yeah, that's true. Some of my sources, Wikipedia, and I found an amazing article called 9 Traits of a Narcissist, Behavior to Watch For by Nick Hall on manofmany.com, and a few other sources through the way that I'll mention. So first, I started off with the dictionary definition of a cult, right? So it's a particular system of religious worship, especially with reference to its rites and ceremonies. So that to me just describes religion. So it's defined, though, by its unusual religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs. So basically ideas that are not in the mainstream.
Unusual could apply to a lot of the mainstream religions as well.
The conclusion I came to, right, is that there's no clear definition of what a cult is. And even the definitions are, every word in that definition is subjective. Ordinarily, the word cult is used negatively.
Yeah.
There's a couple of more positive definitions of it, more in a cultural sense. Like if a film is a cult classic, that's seen as a positive, right? But usually cult is referred to as a negative. Religion scholar Megan Goodwin defined the term cult when it is used by a layperson, so us plebs, often being shorthand for a religion I don't like.
Okay.
What we're saying is it's basically a religious belief that's not accepted by the mainstream as being an official religion. The word cult used to mean appropriate worship of a saint or in a specific location. But since the 19th century, it's become to mean excessive devotion. Again, excessive devotion is subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, because that can apply to, again, a lot of the mainstream religions.
Exactly. Of course, people that are anti-cult believe that there's an element of mind control and brainwashing involved in cults. Subjective, isn't it?
Yep.
Like, what's the difference between brainwashing and education? It's whether you agree with the idea or not.
Yeah.
Groups labeled as cults range in size from local groups with a few followers to international organizations with millions of followers.
Would you consider in all your research the Scientologists are a cult?
I'll get to that. You should know that if I'm ever found murdered, it's probably...
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking.
And it's probably everything I've said on this podcast. So
we are going to be issued with, at best, served with cease and desist.
Scientology, in my personal belief, it's an official religion in the States, but for sure is something I would call as a cult.
They seem like a very unsavory bunch, everything I read. And I've watched a few documentaries.
One of the things that I would say, which again is subjective, but is one of the defining features of a cult is the difficulty to leave the cult. If you can just up and walk away because you've changed your mind with no real repercussions to your life, to an extent, I feel like leaving any religion will probably be disruptive to an extent. But like, if they allow you to walk away and leave, then that's not a cult.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the main definitions is how much personal sacrifice you have to make. There's a lot of cults where you literally have to hand over your financial control over to the cult.
And also there's the cutting yourself off from your old life, from your family. And that seems to be something kind of exclusive or more in line with cults and religions.
But again, there are religions that I consider that do that. You and I, we had a couple of Jehovah's Witness friends over the years, and they for sure were not allowed to leave.
No, there were consequences.
Anyone that did leave basically got cut off from their family, as well as the religion, as well as their community.
And there were punitive consequences. Well, we personally experienced that with our friend, for her being friends with us, there were punishing measures.
So yeah, those are some of the definitions I was looking into. Then I started looking at new religious movement. So a new religious movement is a religious community or spiritual group of modern origins, meaning since 1800s. So basically, any religion that is formed, created, etc., since the 1800s, including branches of Christianity, blah, 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 other religions, is considered a new religious movement. There are tens of thousands of them worldwide, and many of them get labeled as cults. So is it that once they get to a certain age, i.e. 1,000 years old, they will move into the mainstream and become religions instead of cults? Who knows? But it seems like there's a wariness, a suspicion of newer religions, which again, could already be hundreds of years old. A lot of these new religious movements are found in Asia and Africa, and the majority of them only have a few members. Some of them have thousands, though, and only a handful of these new religious movements, meaning religions that have started since mid-1800s, have more than 1 million people. So then I started looking at subcategories of cults. The worst kind of cult, by everyone's definition, and very easy to label as a cult, are what is known as the destructive cult. So this usually means groups whose members have injured or killed other members of their own group or other people.
That's dark.
Yeah. Some people also include cults that exploit people here in this in this category. Often main characteristics of a destructive cult is a totalitarian regime and emphasis on money making. It's also associated with behavioral changes, loss of personal identity, estrangement from family and society, and enslavement by cult leaders. You might have to go and live on the compound and sacrifice all of your finances and dress the same as everyone else and shave your head and, not talk to your family off site and so forth. So you're completely giving yourself over to them. It's basically like a super toxic relationship.
Yeah.
If you had a friend who had a boyfriend that made them do all this, you'd be like, get the fuck out. This is dangerous. In these destructive cults, there's very often examples of sexual abuse within the organization and physical abuse. So when we're talking about destructive cults, can you think of any?
What was the question?
Can you think of any examples of a destructive cult?
Oh, the Waco, Texas. What was that all about?
Yeah, Waco. We've also got the Manson family.
Yeah. Oh.
Right. So they've killed 5 people on the night of August 8th, 1969, including pregnant actress Sharon Tate and her friends who were at her house, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent. On the following evening, other members of the family then also murdered supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. Clear example of a destructive cult. The next group of cults, oh, by the way, I should say some of these categories of cults overlap, right? So the next category is doomsday cults.
Okay.
So these are cults that believe that there's going to be a disaster or some kind of end of days scenario. So this was particularly big in the 80s and 90s. Do you remember in the run up to millennium?
It's the Jehovah's Witnesses. Are they not in that category?
Obsession with the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well,
no, they do. They do think that there will be the apocalypse and so forth, but they haven't set a date for it. So these doomsday cults often have a date in mind. when this thing will happen. So they're preparing for it. Many of them thinking that the millennium would bring around the end of the world. And then there were also those who were looking at the Mayan calendar. You know how the Mayan calendar ended in 2012. So they thought that that would be the year that the world would end. Then we have political cults.
Oh.
So I'm going to say Trump followers.
I was just going to say that. Yep. And one thing we know is that politics and religion do not mix.
No.
And should not mix.
Should not mix. Do not mix. It's terrible when they mix.
Awful.
Et cetera, et cetera. Political extremism and political cults usually are extremely on the left or extremely on the right. Clear examples are the MAGA Trump followers.
Yep.
Again, it seems like with a political cult, though, it can be that you label it a political cult if it is a political ideology that you don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
The next one that I find fascinating is polygamist cults.
Okay.
So basically cults that promote having one or more spouse, and it's usually the man having more than one wife. There are 50,000 members of polygamist cults in North America. You'd assume there is a smaller percentage of men in there. Otherwise, it wouldn't work out mathematically.
Like a 1-to-5 ratio.
Yeah. Okay, so the Mormons, they used to practice polygamy, and it's a common misconception that they still do.
Okay.
But in 1890, the president of Mormons, Wilford Woodruff,
I know a little bit about the Mormons because I've been watching The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Right. So you're basically an academic expert. Yeah. So he announced that there would be no more new polygamist marriages. So it's not like they dissolved the existing ones, but they said there will be no more new ones.
Okay.
So in order to get more accepted as a religion, as a legitimate religion within the states, and for its members to be respected in society, they had to drop this polygamist ideal.
That's somewhat admirable.
Right? This was to increase positive feelings towards the Mormon, and it actually did help. They did have to reiterate that rule about no polygamy because people were still having what is known as plural marriages. And that actually caused splinter groups to break off so that they can continue to practice polygamy. Then we have the racist cults.
Okay.
Well, again, I would put some of the political cults in here as well.
Yeah.
QAnon for sure. Racist, xenophobic, etc.
Yep.
But a racist cult, key example, Ku Klux Klan.
Yep.
Persecution and killing of African Americans as human sacrifice. You don't get more culty than that. Then you have like secret Aryan cults in Germany and Austria in the 19th and 20th century, which basically influenced the rise of Nazism. Nazism being another political cult, you could argue. Definitely a destructive cult, definitely a political one, definitely a racist one.
Yep.
And there's still loads of white supremacy groups in the US, across the world.
These people terrify me the most.
They really do. And unfortunately, they found an outlet and they found legitimization with Trump in power.
And somehow they seem to be more accepted than the smaller cults. And they are frightening. They're frightening because they are almost part of the mainstream in the US.
Exactly. It's terrifying. Then we're moving on to terrorist cults. Again, a lot of overlap with racist and political cults and obviously destructive cults. Now, again, I always flinch at the word terrorism or get a bit wary of its use because, it's no secret. I've said I'm Palestinian, and I feel like the word terrorism is often used as a political tool, and that if you agree with someone's cause, they're a freedom fighter. And if you don't agree with their cause, they're a terrorist.
It's a very lazy insult to hurl at somebody to delegitimize them.
Yeah, exactly. And people can be called freedom fighters and respected even if civilians are hurt or killed, if their cause is deemed as noble by the person describing it at that time. So that's why I get uncomfortable. And that's me saying it as a pacifist. I don't want anyone to be hurt. I don't agree with any kind of movement or whatever that will hurt civilians and let alone kill them. But yeah, I get a bit uncomfortable with the word terrorism for that reason. And the same goes for terrorist cults. I feel like, again, like you said, it's a bit lazy. Do people agree with them or not? If they don't agree with their ideals, then they're written off as a terrorist.
Yep.
And they're getting better at using the word to describe all acts of terror. But I always think of a time where, in particular, if it was an Arab or a brown person committing this act of terror, then they were a terrorist. If it was a white male, for example,
then they're mentally ill.
A lone wolf with mental health issues, right?
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot, and we pick up on that a lot. Things that sometimes happen in the Western world or by Western people is not termed the same way as if it happens in the Middle East or by a Middle Eastern person.
Exactly. So that's why I feel uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
I'm happy for the word terrorist to be used if it's used across the board.
Yeah, consistently.
Exactly, consistently. But terrorist cults, we are talking about like Osama bin Laden. Definite example of a cult.
Yeah, we can't argue that one.
Yeah, exactly. No,
I mean, argue that.
That's not to say we don't have terrorists. I'm just saying. So Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, which has led to ISIS, obviously QAnon after their storming of Capitol Hill, definitely fall into terrorist cults here. A lot of the white supremacy groups, all of this kind of activity falls under destructive cult as well. So therefore, I think it's really interesting because these cult behaviors is therefore really important for understanding our war on terrorism. Because it's that cult mentality that leads people to follow these leaders like Osama bin Laden and the QAnon shaman and stuff like that, right? Okay, so brings me on to my next bit of research. What makes a cult leader? Okay, tell me. Or are you asking me? Well, a bit of both. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and I'm going to go through the characteristics. I'm going to ask you if you think you have them.
Me?
I feel like if either of us was to become a cult leader, it would be you.
Oh, well, I mean, I was
you're like, I'm flattered.
I mean, do you think I'm a good salesperson? I'm charismatic.
Well, let me just read the description first.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The positive traits are that they are charismatic, that they make their followers feel loved and part of a community.
That's true.
So they offer security, they offer family, they offer community, quite often to people that are lost in some way. Or
can I just intercept that? Like, what I understand is that people who are lost, people who are vulnerable, people who are looking for something, people who are lonely, who, the people that seem to join cults seem to need a feeling of acceptance and a feeling of community. They want that. And I can kind of see how they get sucked into it by a charismatic cult leader who offers, if somebody came knocking to the door and said to me, I can offer you a life where we can live off grid, away from society, create our own utopia. I mean, that's exactly what I want. Not part of the whole community, because I want to do this just my family. But you can't buy that sort of thing on Zoopla.
Yeah. And also, before people think, it only happens to vulnerable people, that's not me. Who of us has not had vulnerable periods in our life after a breakup or after problems with the family or after losing a job or whatever? We've all had times where we have been vulnerable, where we might be more susceptible to something like this, right? And then another characteristic is that these cult leaders make themselves relatable to their followers. So either, I've been in your situation, I'm also an ex-addict, or I was also lost and I found the way, they make themselves relatable. In the book Jihad and Sacred Vengeance, Psychological Undercurrents of History, there's a title, psychiatrist Peter A. Olson compares Osama bin Laden to certain cult leaders, including Jim Jones of Jonestown, and says that each of these individuals fit at least 8 of the 9 criteria for people with narcissistic personality disorders. So I'm going to read them and you tell me if you've got it or not. Okay.
Oh, God. Okay.
All right. Number 1, grandiose sense of self-importance.
No. No, I'm very modest.
Preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love.
Oh, I'd like to have that.
I know. I wish we did. The belief that they are special and unique and can be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions.
No, that sounds...
The first part is lovely, and I would love for everyone to think that they're special and unique. And then they ruin it with, therefore I should only consort with the queen.
Yeah, a little conceited, a little overinflated egos. Yeah.
Need for excessive admiration. I mean, who doesn't like that?
I mean, yeah, nice.
I feel like that eliminates most British people because you pay them a meek compliment and they're like, oh, no, stop. It's like, I just said your hair looks okay-ish today. Sense of entitlement.
Do you know, so far, cult leaders are very, like you just said, seem to be very self-entitled, but also have a real confidence in themselves, huh?
I'm getting severe only child vibes here.
Yeah.
I feel like siblings knock most of the shit out of you early on.
They do seem to have a very healthy self-confidence.
Right? Well, it's not healthy, is it?
A very unhealthy self-confidence.
They've gone past healthy self-confidence to the land of cult leader. Interpersonally exploitative behavior. So treating other people like shit, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's not just that they're like, let's make this lovely community. It's like, let's make this lovely community. And then I'm going to treat you like my personal slaves, right?
Yeah.
Lack of empathy, which is interesting because they obviously are able to transmit the idea that they have empathy.
Yeah. To emulate it.
Yeah.
Well, that's manipulative. So very confident, but manipulative.
Yeah. Envy of others or a belief that others are envious of them.
Paranoid.
Yeah. Yes, exactly that. Demonstration of arrogant and haughty behaviors or attitudes. So yeah, that's quite an interesting list of characteristics. So it's really interesting to see that basically they hit at least 8 of 9 criteria.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how many CEOs of big corporations, fit that brief.
So we've already discussed a little bit the difference between a religion and a cult. And the best definition I found was this: a religion belongs to the wider culture. Its adherents come and go freely. A cult tends to be countercultural, so not really part of the mainstream, restricting the social life of its adherents to other cult members. And that's from hopesandfears.com. So basically coming and going is a biggie. Mm-hmm. And we know some established, accepted religions, witnesses, Scientology, where we know for a fact that people can't come and go as freely as it is claimed they can. The other thing I want to say that I saw in some definitions of a cult, but it seems like living together in some kind of compound, commune type situation often played a role. And I think that's because when you make someone sacrifice everything, their home or whatever, sell their home and give you the proceeds of that sale and move in on a compound, which happens a lot, it's much easier to control you. Mm-hmm. If you literally financially cannot leave, that's one amazing way to keep people there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's much easier, obviously, to brainwash, to control every element of that person's life and to have them readily available to be your slaves and to exploit and manipulate them. So living together seems to be a very common feature in the more destructive, manipulative cults. Now, what I wanted to do was tell you about a couple of different cults and just do a little bit of a deeper dive into a handful of cults. Obviously, there's so many. I couldn't cover all of them. So apologies if there's a favorite cult that you have that I haven't covered. Koreshians or Branch Davidians. Okay, so David Koresh.
That sounds familiar.
I'm sorry. Is that the charismatic leader? Maybe you have to hear them speak. But when you look at the pictures, you're like, I don't know if he would have convinced me to do anything.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
Right? Looks like an accountant or something.
Yeah. Huh? Mm-hmm. Oh, are these the Waco people?
He formed the cult with Benjamin Rodin in 1955, and it ended in 1993 with a 51-day siege on their compound in Waco, Texas. So yes, Waco.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the compound was destroyed by fire. 4 of the ATF agents and 2 residents were killed by members of the Branch Davidians during the initial raid, while 4 members of the cult were killed by ATF agents.
What's an ATF agent?
Hey, Google, what does ATF stand for?
On the website atf.gov, they say the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives.
And then 76 of the cult members died in the fire and they were of all ages. So that was 1993. I mean, that's recent.
I remember it.
I know. Because when we were growing up, maybe this is where our fascination comes from. Because there were so many of these cults happening in the 70s and the 80s, you and I being born in the 80s and then having sort of living memory in the late 80s and 90s, that was a time of satanic panic and being scared of cults. And then satanic cults were the worst of them all.
God, I remember so much in the news in the 90s about Satanism.
We were quite gothy, and so we had a lot of like prejudice against us because obviously we must be Satanists, and obviously Satanists were murderers.
It was the 90s. It was in fashion.
Yeah, I know. What can you say?
What are you going to do?
But yeah, so 1993, I know for the millennials listening, that sounds like, you know, another lifetime, but it's our lifetime.
It was 5 years ago. What are you talking about?
5 minutes ago. Then we've got Heaven's Gate.
Okay.
I know it sounds good already, right?
Sounds nice.
The people that started it have the most wholesome names I've heard in all of this cult research. Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite.
Wow.
That doesn't even sound like real names.
They sound like they live in a nice detached house with a white picket fence.
But this was founded in 1974. So again, to put it in perspective, only about 5-6 years after the Manson family, right? And also made me think like how much rarer it is to have a female head of cult.
Oh.
There are examples, and there's loads of examples of, not loads, but there are more examples of sort of a second in command being female. And that female, which I'll come on to, that female almost being used to legitimize.
As baits. Yeah. Yep. Oh, God.
Yeah, it's sickening. Again, very rare to have a female head of cult. So I was wondering, and I didn't look into it, but I wonder whether females are less likely to have narcissistic personality disorder, whether they're less likely to be successful if they try to set up a cult.
Yes.
Hey, Google, are women less likely to have narcissistic personality disorder?
On the website ncbi.nlm.nih.gov, they say the prevalence of NPD was significantly greater in males than in females.
No shit.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, so basically that must contribute to it. And I'm sure sexism has contributed to it as well, where women trying to run anything, even to this day, good or bad, are taken less seriously, right? And struggle to get as successful as their male counterparts. So, sorry, never did I think this would become a feminist diatribe. That's not a hill I'm going to stand on, that there should be more women cult leaders because it's sexist not to. Anyways, moving on. So we've got Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite. Scholars have described the theology of Heaven's Gate as a mixture of Christian I'm not going to say that, as Christianity, New Age, and ufology.
Okay. As in UFOs?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the Heaven's Gate name is literal, okay?
Okay.
So as such, it's been characterized as a UFO religion.
Okay.
They believe that they could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrials by rejecting their human nature. So basically, by acting more alien, they could become an actual alien.
Wow. That's some serious self-belief.
But they had a little problem because when Bonnie Nettles died of cancer in 1985, she kind of disproved her own point.
Oh.
Because they originally thought that you would go up to heaven alive before you die on a UFO, but she just died on Earth.
Yeah.
There was no UFO coming to take her to heaven. So they had to tweak their beliefs because their founder died and disproved it in her dying. So that's awkward, isn't it? Oops. It's like those people that would gather on a hill for the end of the world, you know, in the millennium, and then nothing happens. And they're like, oh, we must have done our math wrong. Oh, actually, it's tomorrow, you know? Yeah, so they tweak their view that basically you go up after you die and some other shit, right? But in 1997, so again, really, for us, really recently, right? The police discovered 39 bodies of followers, including the co-founder Applewhite in San Diego. They had basically performed mass suicide, coinciding with the approach of the comet Hale-Bopp. So they thought that this comet would close the Heaven's Gate.
Oh, God.
So they announced on their website that they were ready to leave this world. And basically, because they thought, oh, you have to be dead to go through the Heaven's Gate, they killed themselves so that they could go through the Heaven's Gate before the comet closed the gate. The movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. So this was one I hadn't heard of before. And it's because it was in Uganda and it only had about 5,000 members, which is, you know, quite a large cult, a large group of people. But it was active between 1989 and 2000. And this cult has one of the highest death counts of any cult in history. So I was surprised that I hadn't heard of it. So originally it was a Christian movement, a branch of Christianity, for people who place even more importance on the 10 Commandments. So they felt like the mainstream churches in Christianity didn't put enough importance on the 10 Commandments. And then it evolved into a doomsday cult, which is quite often what happens. So people get sucked in when it feels fairly friendly and harmless, and then it evolves for the worse, and they're already in it and they can't get out. So that happens a lot. So it originally attracted a lot of former nuns and priests who were disillusioned with the Catholic Church and the Ugandan government, and they wanted a pure kind of worship. So if you see a group of people, and there are a lot of like nuns and priests and so forth, that gives it legitimacy as well, doesn't it? So they initially lived on a communal farm. They worked together, they helped each other out financially, and they had a school. That could sound really good, or it could sound, if you're suspicious like us, incredibly creepy. Basically, I'm reading into that they can't live without each other. Yeah. And the children, the education is from within. There's no external sources. So some accusations were made of child labor and unsanitary living conditions. So there was already people suspicious of this cult for those reasons. But in March 2000, the leadership decided suddenly that the world was going to end. And they surprise killed 530 members in an explosion at what they claimed to be a party. Set off an explosion which killed 530 people. And that's not even where it ends. After the explosion, the leadership didn't stop killing, and the final death toll was nearly 1,000 people.
Jesus Christ.
To put it in perspective, that's more than Jonestown, which I will cover in a bit, but that was about 948. The figures vary, but...
And when did that happen?
2000.
Jesus.
And I don't remember any of it.
No, I don't.
Like I said, it's the highest death toll of a cult out of any cult. Okay, now this one fascinates me, and you're going to freak out about this. The Rajneeshis.
Okay.
Have you seen the documentary?
No.
On Netflix. It's called Wild Wild Country. Okay, so this is a cult, and I'm going to tell you about the cult, and then I'm going to tell you about someone I know very well who accidentally joined this cult.
What do you mean accidentally?
I will tell you the story. Her story, more than anything, tells me, because she's such a smart, bright person who I used to work with and I'm very close friends with, I will tell you all about it. But if she can accidentally get sucked into something like this, then 100% it can happen to anyone. Okay.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
So the founder is a man called Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, also known as Osho. So the followers are called Rajneeshis or Oshoites, or orange people, because all of them were made to wear oranges and pinks and reds and so forth. So again, another cult feature, making people dress the same, look the same, right? So it got really big in the 70s and in 80s, and it was always surrounded in controversy, okay? They formed a really large intentional community in Oregon called Rajneeshpuram, and immediately started having problems with the local community. Their members started running for the local council.
Okay.
So they thought, let's take over from within. It's quite clever, really. But they got in real big trouble because they were accused of trying to assassinate a local attorney. Okay. They then committed a huge bioterror attack in 1984, where they released the salmonella at local restaurants, poisoning 751 people.
God.
They did that to influence the local election by putting the voters out of commission. So in the local election, there were people running from the cult and from the local community. And so they tried to wipe out as many of the local community voters as possible so that the cult nominator candidate would...
They are creative with their
creative and so creepy. I don't think that anyone died, thankfully, from that salmonella attack, but they poisoned 751 people. So charges were also brought against Rajneesh, and this is another case of a female helping give legitimacy to the organization. His second in command was a woman called Ma Anand Sheila, who was his personal secretary, who basically ran the Oregon town. He traveled a lot. She was the one that was left running the show. I mean, he traveled a lot on private jets and had like Jaguars and stuff like that.
Let me Google this guy. I want to get a visual. He's smiley too in all these pictures. He looks like, you know, if you didn't know better, a very wise, smiley person.
Charges were brought against Rajneesh and his organization, his cult, his intentional community. And Ma and Sheila actually pleaded guilty to attempted murder and assault. I mean, there's very little coming back to that. So in 1985, he got deported back to India, and over there was more successful than ever, had more followers, made more money.
And they knew about all of what happened in Oregon?
Yep. Well, okay, 1985. It's not like you could Google, right?
Yeah.
We can forgive people because it was not so easy to find out about people's stuff.
Yeah, you didn't have social media. You couldn't just like look someone up and do some stalking.
You can understand how a lot of people would not have the full story because he went back to India and was treated like a martyr. So he somehow spun it like maybe these racist Americans or something, right? He died in 1990 and was buried at the ashram in Pune, which became the Osho International Meditation Resort. And it attracts about 200,000 people from all over the world a year.
Still.
Yeah. This is one of the rare examples of the cult kind of continuing in some capacity after the cult leader dies. Quite often they kind of wrap up.
They disband.
They disband, yeah. Whereas this one seems to go from strength to strength. Prominent visitors include politicians, media personalities, and the Dalai Lama.
What? Come on. What?
The current leaders downplay early controversies in Oregon in an effort to appeal to a wider audience. But yeah, you can watch the Wild Wild Country documentary.
I'm gonna.
It was so good. This one hurt me. One of the early disciples in the early 80s was Arianna Huffington.
As in Huffington Post?
Oh, I just love her. She's so good.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So do you want to hear the story of my friend who accidentally joined this cult?
Okay, yeah.
So it's MC.
No, MC.
So you've met her. You know she's smart with it.
What the fuck happened there?
Okay, so let me tell you the story. She went to Australia. I think the way it works, it's a 1-year visa, but if you do 4 months in rural work, then you can extend your working visa for another year, which she wanted to do. So she had found a couple of different jobs. You know, I think she had one job where she was house sitting on a farm for a bit. And then she found another job. I think there's a website where you can find jobs that count as rural jobs. So she was looking on the database of jobs that count towards this rural working requirement and found this organization where you live on site, which is super useful in rural Australia. And you help with the sort of basic agricultural tasks. And
oh my God, I see where it's going. Oh my God, it creeps me out because I can just imagine being...
She thought, that sounds wonderful. That sounds ideal. That sounds lovely. And yoga. And
how did she get out? I'm creeps out because I can imagine being terrified.
Basically, she gets there. Thankfully, she recognized really quickly it wasn't the place for her. They were criticizing her publicly in front of everyone during the sharing circles.
Did sharing circles not raise alarm bells?
Yeah, it did. When she tells the story, there's alarm bell after alarm bell. And again, because she is so with it, thankfully.
Because I wouldn't automatically think cult if I heard sharing circles, but as a non-people-y sort of person, I would hate that.
No, I know.
I would run a mile.
Exactly. There's a lot of things socially I would have been like, no, this isn't for me.
No.
And I think part of it was that she just got super bad vibes and she basically asked to leave. And then it was a bit of a struggle for her to leave.
How did they let her leave?
Well, they didn't really. There was just the guy who was in charge of like the one van that they had.
Oh my God.
Because again, it was super rural, who said, look, I'm going into town for whatever reason. Why don't you get a lift with me?
God, thank God for that guy.
Right? Because otherwise she would have really struggled because this compound thing was in the middle of nowhere. So she can't just walk out. She'll fucking die in the outback. Do you know what I mean?
I'm sure a lot of people are scared and less self-assured, less brave than MC, not knowing what to do, thinking that if they try to leave, the consequences are worse than just sticking it out.
That's it. Exactly. And a lot of them thinking, oh, well, I've only got to do 4 months of this in theory. After she left, she realized they were Rajneeshis.
How long did she stay?
A week.
That even sounds like a long time.
And she said it was hard.
I would have been petrified.
Yeah. That story was one of the creepiest stories I've ever heard.
Because of how easy it is.
Yeah.
She went for job opportunity and it turned out to be a cult.
Before you judge people about ending up in these situations, in any kind of toxic relationship or toxic situation or cult, it happens. It happens really scarily easily to very smart people. The next cult I want to talk about is NXIVM. I think I'm saying that right. It looks like Roman numerals. And so imagine this, it's NXIVM.
Okay.
It's an American cult linked to sex trafficking, forced labor, and racketeering.
Okay. What's racketeering?
Hey, Google, what's racketeering?
According to Wikipedia, racketeering is a type of organized crime in which the perpetrators set up a coercive, fraudulent, extortionary, or otherwise illegal coordinated scheme or operation to repeatedly or consistently collect a profit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Fraud, basically, on a extremely widespread, organized way. So it was based in the outskirts of Albany, New York, and originally claimed to be a multi-level marketing company, which is a whole other form of cult, which I didn't.
Oh, God. Okay, yeah.
Right. There's a bunch of documentaries about things like...
What was that one called? It sounds like Lululemon, but it's not.
LuLaRoe or something.
Oh,
yeah.
God. LuLaRoe.
Yeah.
Selling the dream.
And the way that they make it hard for you to leave is by making you invest so much of your money,
like a financial hostage.
Basically, you've invested so much and you have all the red flags going up, but you're like, oh, well, I haven't made my money back. I've lost money. If I stop now, I'll lose all that money. Whereas if I continue going, maybe I'll make it back. Maybe apparently I'm going to be rich if I continue going. Right. I didn't even go down that route because that feels like it needs a whole other fucking episode.
Yep. Oh,
right?
yeah.
But so they started off claiming they were multi-level marketing or an MLM company. And their offerings were personal and professional development seminars, which, super popular at the moment, right? But they were actually a recruiting platform for a secret society called DOC, which would sex traffic women and brand them.
Oh, God.
Literally brand them.
Oh, God.
A lot of sex traffickers tattoo people, and there's even some charities set up to mark them literally like you do cattle. These are ours,
God.
Don't steal my property if you do. And now she can't escape because she's branded for life. There's a couple of charities set up by tattooists and with tattooists for sex workers and people that have been sex trafficked and branded either with branding or tattoos, because sometimes they literally brand them, meaning burning their...
Oh God.
They cover them up for free with other tattoos because, imagine seeing that every fucking day.
Oh my God.
So in 2018, the founder, Keith Raniere, 2018, we're talking 3 years ago.
What? Okay.
Yeah. So the founder was Keith Raniere and Alison Mack. Have you heard of her?
Yes. Why do I know her name?
Actress from Smallville.
I read an article about that not so long ago.
They were arrested on charges relating to the sex trafficking, along with a bunch of others from NXIVM. Mack got 3 years in prison. Raniere also in jail for 120 years. And he continued to run the cult from in prison.
Oh, God. How
is that allowed?
How is it possible? How?
I don't know. I mean, it depends. You've got different amounts of freedoms in different jails, right? Some people can still run their fucking Instagram from prison. So, but it makes me sick because I don't know why, but it just feels worse when there's a woman involved, like we said, entrapping other women.
God. What was her incentive?
Power, money. Yeah. But they would literally cauterize women, literally burn them to brand them. And there were loads of allegations that Mac was even present at the cauterizing.
Oh, God. She is awful.
Isn't that disgusting?
The hell made her do that?
So recent. So recent that one was uncovered. All right. So now I'm going to go over one of probably the biggest and well-known cults, and that's Jim Jones and Jonestown and the people.
And I know nothing about them.
Oh, my God. It's just such a wild ride. Let me tell you. You've probably heard the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid."
Mm-hmm.
We all drink the Kool-Aid. That comes from this.
Oh God. Okay. My imagination is going crazy.
Yeah. So, and this one gets me because it is such a good example of what I was saying about a cult that starts off great. Like you can totally see why people are joining it. And then in this case, mainly because Jim Jones just goes on this like megalomaniac trip, turns into something just so horrible and twisted.
Do you know what? He looks like a 70s cult leader.
He really does. He is the epitome. They identify as a branch of Christianity with socialist views, and they were founded in 1954 in Indianapolis, Indiana. 1954, this is time of segregation, which is a horribly shameful part of history of the world. Eventually, the temple moved to California and then eventually to Jonestown, which they built themselves, obviously named after Jim Jones, in Guyana. There was probably about 3,000 to 5,000 members of the People's Temple, perhaps up to 20,000, but that's never been proved, and that's probably more based on what they claim. So the founder called himself Reverend Jim Jones, and he had a very strong socialist vibe with an emphasis on racial equality. So again, at that time, that's so progressive. So he became a student pastor at the Somerset Southside Methodist Church in Indianapolis, but then left the church because it barred him from integrating African Americans into his congregation. I mean, sounds noble and great at this point, right? So 1954, he founds his own church in Indianapolis, and he rejected the Bible as white men's justification to dominate women and enslave people of color.
Okay.
If I was to join a church, it would be that one.
So far, so good.
But then he realizes that he can do faith healing, and that brings a lot of attention and therefore money into his church. So he starts faking healings because these healings increase people's faith, leading them to donate more, leading more people to come through the doors, et cetera, et cetera. In these healings, he used things like chicken livers and other animal products, claiming that these awfully bits were cancers that he was removing from people.
Oh.
What? In 1955, he bought his first building and formed his racially mixed church. But he's still doing these fake healings and attracting people who are pro-racial equality. He used to hold really large conventions of tens of thousands of people and perform these fake healings and also fake clairvoyancy. He used to hire private detectives to find out people's numbers and addresses and social security numbers, and he would memorize them and then predict them at the conferences. But then, like in 1960, he starts a soup kitchen for the poor, as well as a job placement service and coal for the winter. So who knows if he started off horrendous or if he was started off good and then started going bad with the attention and the adoration, or whether he was always evil, but just knew that by doing these amazing things, he was going to attract people to him. Also he stressed equality and asked his members of his church not to wear extravagant clothing because he didn't want the poorer members to feel out of place.
Yeah.
Wherever he started off on the good, bad spectrum, he definitely started moving to the really fucking evil very, very quickly. This was also fucking freaky. I learned this very recently. I've been obsessed with Jonestown for a long time, and I did not know this. But they were known as a gospel church. So they had obviously a very, very large African-American community and were known as a gospel church. And there's a documentary coming out about their gospel choir. Their gospel choir produced albums and was world famous at the time.
Really?
Yeah. And you can still find them on Spotify. They were put forward and a lot of money and effort and time was put into it because Jim Jones saw it as a real marketing and recruitment tool for the church as a whole.
Wow. I'm going to take a listen to them later.
And I had a listen when I first heard that on a podcast, and they were really fucking good.
Yeah, I bet.
Then it starts asking more and more of its members, more than what you would expect from a church. So, for example, they start asking people to spend Christmas and Thanksgiving with the church rather than the blood relatives.
Okay.
Again, that's the start of isolating people from their family, right? It started asking members to donate all their material possessions on the understanding that the church would provide for all their needs. So just give us everything. We'll take care of you. You won't want for anything, but you can't leave because you literally have nothing except we give it to you. In 1961, Jones claimed that he thought Indiana would suffer a nuclear attack. Remember that the members at this point think he's clairvoyant. So if he says, oh, this is going to happen, they think that's going to happen. So he claimed that Indiana would suffer this nuclear attack. People believe him because he's convinced them that he's a clairvoyant. And so he tells them that they have to move the temple. And remember, 1961, this is kind of Cold War era.
Yeah.
So saying that there's a nuclear attack coming, it's not that far-fetched for most people to believe that. In 1964, he moved 140 members to Redwood Valley in California and set up a church there. The district attorney was called Timothy Stone, and he was a member.
Okay.
That helped legitimize the church in the area. And I'm sure he fast-tracked and pulled a few strings in terms of helping them move, helping them register as a place of worship or whatever you have to do in the States. And the membership grew. And then they started having permanent sites in LA and San Francisco as well. At this time, and through most of it, approximately half of the members were Black. Which, considering that segregation only ended in 1964, and we're talking about 1965 here, only ended in 1964 in states officially 10 years after Jones set up his church and only a few years before they moved to California. So to have half of the members of any organization, institution at that time to be Black and the other half white or of other backgrounds is really progressive. By mid-1970s, in addition to its locations in Redwood Valley, LA, and San Francisco, the temple also established satellite congregations in almost a dozen other California sites. So they moved to California in 1965. In less than 10 years, they've got branches all over California. I mean, that is significant growth. Jones and his church earned a reputation for aiding the city's poorest citizens, especially racial minorities, drug addicts, and the homeless. Which, now that we know what we know about Jim Jones and his church, I read that in a different twist. And I read that as him targeting the vulnerable people.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
In 1973, the Gang of Eight, which is what they would become known as, tried to defect from the temple. And Jones sent out search parties looking for them. So 8 people tried to leave, and he literally hunted them down. He even rented a plane to search for them.
Okay. So he's obviously worried that they knew too much.
Yeah. So the Gang of Eight hid in Montana and wrote a long letter documenting their complaints and their concerns. And it soon becomes clear that Jones is using the temple for his own power and his own benefits, financial, social, whatever. By spring 1976, Jones openly admits, even to outsiders, that he is an atheist, the leader of the church. Jones started attracting more and more attention from the authorities, from the IRS because of religious tax relief issues and the Gang of Eight's complaints, and being tied to radical groups. 1974, the People's Temple rented land in Guyana, and he wanted to start building up this utopian society. He wanted it to be a socialist paradise and a sanctuary, which, you know, that sounds lush.
When you say it like that.
Right? And I've been to Guyana. I've been to near where Jonestown was. It is fucking amazing. It's gorgeous countryside. The people are adorable and so friendly. The food is great. The landscape, like, yeah, it's amazing.
Again, he's selling the dream.
And bear in mind, again, this is like Vietnam happening at the time. Like there's a lot of shit. Cold War's finished. You know, these people that still remember World War II. The world is not the happiest of places at this time. So, I mean, you can see why he had this mass appeal, right? So by 1977, there was only 50 residents in their Guyana utopian paradise. So in 3 years, they only got 50 residents. They picked Guyana because it's a racially diverse country. Guyana basically has the indigenous populations. It also has a large Black community, the descendants of the slave trade on the whole. It has a large white community because of the colonizers and people that have moved there since, because it used to be a British colony. Because it was a British colony, they speak English. And then also the British colonizers transported a lot of Indians from India over there as well. Or the trade route between there was very high. So you have people of Indian descent there as well. So it is very racially diverse. I wouldn't say it was homogenous. There was a lot of hatred around there. And it also already had a socialist government. So in Jim Jones's eyes, I don't know how much experience he had with actually going to Guyana before he picked it, but they had very similar beliefs. The catalyst for the large-scale move to Guyana was an article in 1977 by a man called Marshall Kilduff in the New West magazine. And the editor, Rosalie Wright, called Jones and read him the article as a favor because he had so much support. So she read him the article before it came out. While still on the phone to this editor, reading him the article about himself, Jones wrote a note to the temple members in the room with him at the time that said, "We leave tonight. Jim Jones realizes this article is going to bring a whole bunch more unwanted attention onto him and the church. So he's like, we're leaving now." So he realized, look, the net is closing in on me here in the States. Let's get the fuck out. So 1977, there's 50 residents in Jonestown in Guyana. In 1978, there's over 900. So in 1 year, it goes from 50 to over 900.
Okay.
Which, you know, you can imagine is too fast a growth for any kind of community or establishment settlement, right? Like it's very unlikely that they are going to be able to grow that fast in a healthy, sustainable way with sanitary conditions and enough food and agriculture.
And are they housing all these people? Are they living on the commune?
Well, they're supposed to be housing all these people.
Wow.
This is one of the things that we'll come to. They promised a tropical paradise free from the supposed wickedness of the outside world. But in reality, especially when you watch the documentary, they're in an incredibly inhospitable area that they chose because it's isolated. They had to start all their agriculture from scratch. There's no way to leave the area on your own. You have to get a plane, a small plane for the local area, you know. And the housing wasn't built fast enough. The agriculture wasn't developed fast enough. It grew too fast, too quickly. Yeah. Family members started getting worried about their loved ones in the church and the ones that moved down to Jonestown. And in 1978, a delegation, including Representative Leo Ryan, who was investigating claims of abuse within the temple, flew down to visit Jonestown. So basically, because there was all this attention, because there were so many American citizens in this compound, Representative Leo Ryan, a bunch of journalists and so forth, went down on a bit of a fact-finding mission. They had to get a small plane to a tiny airfield near-ish to the settlement. Like it's not easy getting there to investigate to see if there were any reasons to be concerned. During this visit, because there were journalists filming, most of this visit is on camera. In that documentary I've told you about, which it's creepy because you see the final moments.
Oh, God.
During this visit, some of the members approached the representative and other members of the group asking to leave with them. And Jim Jones was saying, of course, if anyone wants to leave, of course, they're more than welcome to leave. So a bunch of the members went with Leo Ryan, the next day to the local airstrip to leave with the delegation. The temple security guards followed them and opened fire. They killed the U.S. representative, Leo Ryan. They killed 3 journalists.
Oh my God. And it was all this on camera.
Yeah.
Whoa.
One of the defectors, and they injured 9 others. And like I said, it's creepy because you can actually see footage of it's being filmed by one of the journalists who actually was killed in this attack. Then that night, because he knew that he was in for it now, you know, he'd obviously heard that the representative had been killed. He knew that there were people looking at him. He knew he was in trouble. He ordered his members to drink cyanide grape flavored Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid.
What?
Thing goes.
So wait. This was an organized suicide.
Yeah, mass suicide.
Oh God. Okay.
In total, 918 people died.
Oh my
including
God.
276 children.
Oh God.
And this included 4 adults in the temple headquarters in Georgetown, which is the Guyanese capital.
Including Jim Jones. It's the greatest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act until the events of September 11th, 2001. Oh my God. That makes that expression, drank the Kool-Aid, just so much creepier.
Yeah. Because of the killings in Guyana, the temple is regarded by scholars and by popular view as a destructive cult. No shit. And at this point, there are still temples in the US, and members say they are scared to leave in case Jonestown survivors target them. They literally thought there was a hit squad that would come out. I would argue that this is one of the biggest contributors to why people are nervous about new religious movements. Because even the ones that sound ideal.
Well, I did not see that coming. I did not see that story turning out that way.
Right. And it's just horrifying. And when you watch the documentary and you hear the story of the survivors and so forth, and the family members of the people who didn't survive.
Oh God, I'm going to watch it today.
You can see how people get sucked in.
Do you know, this one upsets me a lot because the kids.
I mean, that's nearly a third of them were children.
But it started with racial equality, socialism.
Horrifying.
I don't like that story.
Well, I didn't want to end on Jonestown because it's one of the most horrific stories.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about a lesser known cult, but one that's like equally fucked up in a lot of different ways. And it's called Love Has Won.
Okay.
The Love Has Won cult. I mean, alarm bells ringing already. This one is freaky because it kind of ended, and I'll tell you how it ended in 2021. So that's recent. That's last year.
Whoa. Okay.
Okay. So it was led again by a woman, Amy Carlson. So one of the few ones that is like solely led by women, which is another reason why I got a bit interested in it. She was known as Mother God within the members. Again, bad start. And even ex-members are now coming out and saying that it was a cult. It was a very small cult. It always has been. So Amy Carlson was from Texas. She was known as being super bright kid. She did really well at school. In her early 20s, she started talking a lot about things like starships, spaceships, intergalactic travel, which, to be honest, is not that weird if you think that the space race was going on and kids like space, you know, but she started getting super, super obsessed with it. So during the 2000s, she starts becoming a bit new agey, a bit hippie-ish, you know, and she started claiming that she experienced paranormal activity and that she was divine. So she left her third husband and her kids and her job as a manager at McDonald's and joined up with someone called White Eagle, who she met online.
Oh, God. Okay. These are all the makings of a really bad story, or a story with a very bad ending.
I mean, I would watch this film, though. They formed a group initially called the Galactic Federation of Light and started posting videos on YouTube in 2009, like the height of YouTube's, right?
Yeah.
The theology is mainly based on conspiracy theories. They claimed that Amy Carlson was a divine 19 billion year old who birthed all of creation.
Okay. So self-belief.
She had been reincarnated 534 times. She apparently was Jesus, Joan of Arc, Cleopatra, and Marilyn Monroe, to name but a few. She claimed that she would lead the 144,000 people. And I've put a note here. Is this the same 144,000 people that the Jehovah's Witnesses
Yeah, I was just
in the
thinking
Bible?
that number sound familiar.
It's a number of people. Supposedly somewhere in the Bible, it says that many people will sit with God in heaven or whatever. So Jehovah's Witnesses believe that they... you want to get into the 144,000 people, which you can imagine is incredibly competitive because it's 144,000 people over the whole history of humankind.
Oh, right. Okay.
So who knows what number we're up to and whether you have to bump someone off the list to get in or whatever. But anyways, Amy Carlson says she's going to lead this 144,000 people to the fifth dimension. They are also started adopting QAnon beliefs. She believed that Donald Trump was her father in a past life. Like, who would even want that? Ugh.
God, if you could pick anyone, why him? Okay. Alarm bells.
She was obviously of the same political beliefs as him.
Yeah.
So that would be a claim to fame in quotation marks. So the core members lived communally with Carlson in a small town in Colorado. Every part of that sentence is like red flag, right? Ex-members started making claims of physical abuse and sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation being super common in terms of being able to manipulate people. I mean, we all know, like, I get cranky without my nap. And the group were banned from drinking. But Amy Carlson drank a lot and usually became an abusive drunk. The movement started growing mainly online, thanks to daily YouTube videos and selling healing online. So I don't know how many people watching these videos initially understood that it was basically a cult. They moved around a lot, briefly to Hawaii, but basically got kicked off of Hawaii when the locals were hostile because Carlson was claiming to be a Hawaiian goddess, the Hawaiian goddess Pele.
Of course she was.
Yeah.
She used to be Jesus.
She's everyone. She was Jesus. She created everyone and everything, and she's Pele. So the Hawaiians kicked her out. They were like, fuck this shit. No.
Yeah.
Just
bad news.
No. So she went back to Colorado, where they were apparently much more tolerant. In September 2020, it was announced that Carlson had cancer and was paralyzed from the waist down. She was last seen alive on the 10th of April, 2021.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay, so remember that date, 10th of April.
Yep.
On the 28th of April, they found her mummified corpse.
What? Oh, God. Oh, my God. I just did not see that coming.
The state of the body suggested that she was dead for several weeks.
Whoa. She was last seen alive on the 10th of April.
Basically, there's a 2-week period between her supposedly being last seen alive to her being found mummified. And it was suggested that she was dead for several weeks. So she died soon after the 10th of April.
All right. Okay.
And was found 2 weeks later. She was only 45 at the time of her death. She was found in a sleeping bag, wrapped in Christmas lights, face covered in glitter, and eyes missing.
Oh, God.
7 members were charged with abuse of a corpse and child abuse because 2 kids were on the property when they found this corpse. They weren't suspected of killing her. They were just charged of tampering with a corpse, which there's a few different crimes, official laws that they broke by doing that. And, bodies are meant to be disposed of in a correct manner, et cetera, et cetera. Pictures from just before her death show her with a purplish tint. She was purple because she'd been taking colloidal silver. So this is something that they were promoting as a cure for COVID, as well as a bunch of other illnesses. So their YouTube video that they were getting money through for healings and so forth, they were promoting that people take colloidal silver.
Oh my God.
FDA warns against taking because if you take it for a long period of time, it can cause this blue-gray discoloration of skin, but more importantly, seizures and organ failures.
Oh my God.
So again, we want to just highlight on this podcast, don't fucking take medical advice from anyone that's not a doctor. The autopsy revealed that she died from alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion. It's not a surprise there, is it? They also worked out that she died in California and been transported to Colorado. So
oh God.
transported the body. They decorated her. They mummified her. But eventually they dropped all the charges of tampering with the corpse. So I don't know whether they deemed the members to have perhaps some mental health issues that made them not responsible for their actions. But basically, you can still see the group's Facebook and YouTube. They've just changed their name to 5D Full Disclosure, and they have a new website, 5dfulldisclosure.org.
I'm so curious to watch YouTube videos, but I think it might haunt me.
Yeah, no, I struggle with that as well for that very reason. But look at her.
Where's a purple picture?
So look how healthy and vibrant, right? Bear in mind, she was 45 when she died.
Oh my God.
This is her just before death.
Oh my God. That's a picture that's going to stay in my mind.
Sorry. It's creepy, isn't it?
She's gray. She's literally like gray.
She's gray.
And emaciated.
Yeah.
I mean, did no one think at that point she needs to go see a doctor because she doesn't look healthy there at all?
I mean, would you take medical advice from her?
No.
Fuck no.
And that was so recent.
So yeah, that was my very, very quick summary of cult.
Do you know what? I loved it. It has disturbed me. It will haunt me. It will give me a lot to think about.
I know. It's like, I love it and I hate it.
But yeah, it's so fascinating, but it's so unsettling. It leaves you feeling unsettled.
So yeah, thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Hey there. Thanks for being a loyal listener.
Do you need a new website or want to boost your social media performance? Or do you hate podcast editing? You've tried optimizing your website and social media channels, but you're still not getting the listeners, downloads, and engagement you want?
We, the Safieh sisters, love helping people with tasks that they hate. We know a thing or two about podcasts, websites, and social media, and we love working with other podcasters and business owners.
So why not head over to switchbladesisterssocialclub.com and go to our Work With Us section. We believe in collaboration over competition. A rising tide raises all ships.
Bye!